Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this class, we're going to study the meaning of taqwa. Taqwa is a very important concept in the Qur'an, and it's discussed by a lot of people and given a lot of different translations. So sometimes we say it means God-fearing, God consciousness, a lot of different translations. So in this video, I want to give some explanation of the term taqwa, but it's going to be from a different angle that you probably haven't heard before. To start off, the word taqwa in Arabic is related to the word waqaya, which means to protect. So the word taqwa has to do with protection. And you can see this meaning in the Qur'an in Surah 17, verse 81, where he says, وَجَعَلَ لَكُمْ سَرَابِيلَ تَقِيكُمُ الْحَرَّ تَقِيكُمْ الْحَرَّ وَسَرَابِيلَ تَقِيكُمْ بَأْسَكُمْ. He says he made for you sarabil, types of clothing or garments that you wear, taqikum. He used the word taqikum, which is from the same root word as taqwa, meaning that protects you. Taqikum al-harra, protects you from the heat. Wa taqikum ba'sakum, and protects you from your violence or your warfare. So this verse supports the linguistic meaning of the word taqwa, which means to protect. Now, there are two verses in the Qur'an that I believe if we look at both of these verses, they give us a good foundation for understanding the depth of the word taqwa in the Qur'an. And that's because I think a lot of times when we think about the word taqwa, we think about it in a very individual way. And what I mean is, we think about it as just my own individual worship and prayer and fasting and these type of things. So I become a muttaqi, I become someone who has taqwa, right? And that's not to say that those things can't be connected to or not a part of taqwa. But there are two verses in the Qur'an that I believe will show us that one of the major meanings of taqwa is the social component or social aspect of taqwa. These two verses are, first of all, chapter 2, verse 237. And in this verse it says, وَأَن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى, which could be translated as وَأَن تَعْفُوا, and that you pardon, you show forgiveness and pardoning, and you don't punish. أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى is nearer or closer or the closest to a taqwa. The other verse is chapter 5, verse 8, which says, اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. Be just, have adl, that is nearer or closer or the closest to taqwa. And these two verses are the only two verses that you find in the entire Qur'an that will say that anything is aqrabu, is the nearest to taqwa. So I believe we should take these two verses as a starting point, as a foundation for our understanding of taqwa. Because if we think of taqwa as a destination or a goal that we're trying to get to, so we're either close to it or far from it. We're approaching it or we're going away from it, right? So then we asked, what is the closest way? Like we say sometimes, the shortest path between 2 points is a straight line. So we say, what's the shortest path to taqwa? What's the closest way to taqwa? These two things are the only two things in the Qur'an that Allah said is aqrabu lit taqwa, nearer or nearest to taqwa. And what are those two things? Al-adlu wal-afwu, justice and forgiveness. So these two things are social things, social components. Justice, al-adlu, is something that happens in our interactions with people, in our dealings with people. And the word adl itself in Arabic means equality. That's what it means, because there's a couple different words for justice in the Quran, not just adl. There's al-adl and al-qist. Al-qist we can talk about in a different video, but al-adl means equality, means to be equal, right? And that's how you can see that is if you look at other verses in the Quran. For example, there's certain things that Allah gave us to do in expiation for committing certain wrongs. So in one verse he says, if you do this thing, do X, Y, and Z. But then when he gets down to if you can't do this and you can't do that, then he says, أَوْ عَدَلُ ذَلِكَ صِيَامًا. He uses the word adl here to mean equal. He says, or what is equivalent or equal to that in fasting. So when we talk about adl as a form of justice, we're talking about equality amongst people. So the person who has adl as a quality, or as a quality, as a mindset, he is someone who has equality in his vision of when he deals with others. He has equality in his mind when he deals with others. He tries to deal with people on an equal basis, not looking at their race, their ethnic background, their religion, their group allegiance. He deals with everyone the same with a sense of equality and fairness. And Allah said, Huwa aqrabu lit-taqwa. That quality is the nearest quality to taqwa. So the person who has taqwa, one of his major characteristics is he or she doesn't discriminate against anyone. Everyone is on the same playing field with that person. And the other quality obviously has a social component, which is al-afu, forgiveness, pardoning, not punishing. So this person, these two things that are the nearest to taqwa, think about the mindset that develops in a person if a person follows that and internalizes that. So this person who is the nearest to taqwa is a person of justice and fairness and equality with everyone they deal with. And they're also a person who, even when they have conflicts with people, they forgive and pardon and overlook and don't punish and don't hold grudges. So we see from these two verses that the nearest qualities to taqwa are social qualities. Now we said part of the linguistic meaning is protection. So how does that relate to what we just said about these social qualities of justice and forgiveness and pardoning? Well, because in order to protect oneself and to protect society from our wrongdoing, we have to have a state of discipline in the way that we deal with things. It's not easy to be just and fair with everyone and to treat everyone equal, because we want to be biased towards certain people that we might like, certain people that belong to our group, certain people that belong to our religion, for example. So to develop a mindset of equality, it's not easy. But in doing so, we protect ourselves from falling into wrongdoing, and we also protect society. And the same thing with al-afu, pardoning. Pardoning is very protective. It protects us from punishing people, from holding grudges, from always being angry, and it protects other people from our anger. So al-adlu wal-afu is very protective. So at-taqwa, part of the meaning of it could be self-discipline, self-control, being forward-thinking. I'm going to touch on this aspect of taqwa in a second, about being forward-thinking and deliberative and calculating in our actions. But first, I want to elaborate a little bit more on this idea of taqwa being a social quality, okay? And where we can see this at further is in Surah Al-Hujurat, which is chapter 49. So chapter 49, it only has 18 verses. And it mentions taqwa in this chapter several different times. And if you look at the theme of this chapter, much of the theme of this chapter is about social issues. So let's read a little bit about that. So he says here in the first verse of the surah, because I want to show you how much taqwa is a theme in this surah. And then when we look at the fact that social issues are a major theme in this surah, and we put those two things together, then we can further support our conclusion that taqwa has a heavy social component. So in the very first verse, it starts off by saying, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allahi wa rasulihi wattaqullah. O you who have believed, do not put yourself forward in the presence of Allah and His Messenger, and have taqwa of Allah. And then if you go down to verse 3, Inna alladhina yaghudduna aswatahum inda rasulillah ulaika alladhina imtahana Allahu qulubahum lit-taqwa. He says, those who lower their voices in the presence of the Messenger of Allah, those are the ones whom Allah has tested their hearts for at-taqwa. Okay? So right in the first 3 verses, he mentions taqwa 2 times. Okay? Then, if you go down to verse 9, even though this verse doesn't mention taqwa, but I want to show the theme, how taqwa is being emphasized in this surah from the very beginning, and then how this surah is focused on social issues. So if you go to verse 9, he says, وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا. If 2 groups of the believers fall into fighting, then make peace between them. فَإِن بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى. If one of them transgresses against the other, فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبَغِي حَتَّى تَفِيءَ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. Then fight all of you, the one that is transgressing, until it returns to the order of Allah. فَإِن فَاءَتْ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ وَأَقْسِطُوا. And if it returns, then make peace between them with adl, equality, وَأَقْسِطُوا. And I'll translate qist here, because they would say and be just, but aqsitu I would say means distributive justice. So aslihu baynahuma bil adli, fix things between them with equality. Don't be partial to one group or the other. Wa aqsitu, and this form of justice is distributive justice, meaning give each its portion that it's supposed to have. That's how you distribute things fairly. Inna Allaha yuhibbul muqsitin. Allah loves those who are muqsitin, who interact and deal with things through distributive justice, giving everyone their rights. But look how this is focused on a very social thing, right? Then the next verse, innamal mu'minuna ikhwa, the believers are only brothers. فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ, so make peace between your two brothers. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, and have taqwa of Allah so that perhaps you can be shown mercy. Okay, so see how taqwa is connected to this social aspect of making peace between people with justice, just like we said in the other verses. اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى, be just, that is nearer to taqwa. Then look in the next verse, social issues. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم. O you who have believed, let not one group of people mock another group of people, perhaps they are better than them. ولا نساء من نساء, nor some women from other women. عسى أن يكون خيرا منهن, it may be that they are better than them. ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم, and don't insult yourselves. ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب, and don't call each other by offensive nicknames. بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان, how bad is the evil name after one has faith. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَتُبْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ, and whoever doesn't repent, then they are the wrongdoers. But look how much it's focused on social things and what creates division amongst the community, right? Let's keep reading, because I want to show you how this is tied to taqwa as a theme in this surah. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اجْتَنِبُوا كَثِيرًا مِنَ الظَّنِّ إِنَّ بَعْضَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٌ. O you who have believed, avoid much suspicion. Truly some suspicion is sin. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا, and do not spy nor backbite one another. أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَنْ يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. Does one of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? So thus you should hate this. Look at the social aspects, not spying, not having suspicion, not backbiting. Then what does he say? وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, and have taqwa of Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَوَّابٌ رَحِيمٌ. Okay, now verse 13, we come to the culmination of this theme, because all through the surah we've seen taqwa, we've seen make peace between people with justice, we've seen don't mock, we've seen don't spy, don't be suspicious, don't backbite, all these social components, and we've seen ittaqullah, have taqwa of Allah. Now look how verse 13 ties all of this together. Ya ayyuhan nasu, O people, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, we have created you from a male and a female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, and we have made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. So we have made you different, not so you can do these things that we mentioned in the previous verses, not so you can fight each other, you can call each other nicknames, you can spy on each other, you can backbite each other. We didn't make you different because of that. لِتَعَارَفُوا, we made you different so you can get to know one another. So you're not better. Don't mock others. You're not better than others. Don't spy on others. Don't have bad thoughts about others. You're not better than others. Who is better? Now, all of these themes are tied together in this next part of the verse. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Truly, the most honorable of you in the sight of Allah is he who has the most taqwa. Is he who has the most taqwa. Right? So that ties all of these themes that we talked about in the surah together and shows us that taqwa has a heavy social component to it. And again, that doesn't mean that the individual components don't matter, but for us to become selfish and to think that I'm just this guy over here just worshiping all the time by myself, but I treat people bad, I'm not fair with people, I don't pardon people, I hold grudges, and I'm one of the muttaqeen, one of the people who have taqwa, the Quranic discourse on taqwa doesn't seem to support that mentality. And the last point I want to leave you with about taqwa today, and that's because I think it relates to everything that we talked about and really gives us some depth of understanding about the word taqwa, is that in order to do all these things, in order to have al-adlu wal-afu, justice, fairness, and pardoning and forgiving, the person with taqwa has to always be forward thinking, has to always be deliberative, has to be able to not just get caught up on the momentary satisfaction of being biased towards someone, of not forgiving someone because it feels good to release our anger. And that's supported by this verse. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullah wal tandur nafsun ma qaddamat lighad. O you who have believed, have taqwa of Allah, and let each nafs, let each soul, or let each person look forward to what it sent forth for tomorrow. This is chapter 59, verse 18. He tells us, have taqwa of Allah, and let each person look forward to what he sent forth for tomorrow. So the person with taqwa is forward looking. So when you experience a situation where you want to be biased and not have justice, or where you want to hold a grudge or release your anger, if you want to have taqwa, you have to discipline yourself to look forward and to realize the consequences of your actions, and how things will be much better for yourself and for society if you withhold and restrain yourself. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.